Hello, hello. Welcome to our meeting on ADHD strategies. Okay, so we hold these parent involvement meetings so that we can just do better and also commiserate, learn new things, and have a good time. So we're just going to go ahead and get in. If you have any questions, go ahead and just drop them in the chat. And all right. So, what is ADHD? First of all, the name isn't super helpful. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And attention, yes, that's part of it, but it's not the only part. Deficit, no, but it sometimes appears that way. Hyperactivity, sorta, but it can show up in ways you don't expect, and disorder, and I'm not really a fan of that word. So some alternate definitions are from people with ADHD are variable attention trait disorder, executive malfunction disorder, and we'll talk about executive functions later, and you'll see why that one works. Emotional regulation disorder, dysregulated attention disorder, selective attention impulse disorder, neuro overload disorder, chronic overwhelm disorder, race car brain, dopamine attention variability executive dysfunction, and capacity management syndrome. So I think just by those names you start to see some common things that are happening here. There's a dysregulation, right? Things aren't functioning in a regulated, predictable, consistent way. There's management issues, would be another way to say it. And attention shows up as well as executive function. So the basic characteristics of ADHD are an inability to focus, impulsive, hyperactive, struggling to finish tasks, procrastination, inability to sit still, struggling with self-control, struggling to follow directions, messy or disorganized work areas, emotional outbursts, and executive function delays. From people with ADHD, they say that the name of the disorder is actually terrible. It doesn't really explain it well at all. Makes it sound like we can't pay attention, but the opposite is actually true. We pay attention to too many things or all the wrong things. It's more a problem of regulating attention than anything else. People with ADHD can actually experience periods of hyperfocus. It's like everyone else is running a marathon at a mostly consistent marathon pace, but I am running the same distance in a series of crazy intense sprints. Collapse from exhaustion until everyone passes me, then I get up and I sprint again. Hyperfocus feels like sprinting to me, but it isn't something I can do all the time, even though people sometimes expect that. So do you see kind of this regulation issue? Fast, slow, not knowing kind of where to put the attention or the focus. What does it feel like? It feels like your brain is changing channels and you can't stop it. It's like walking on sand and everyone else is walking on pavement and you can't figure out why you can't keep up. And you start thinking, what's wrong with me? It's a hamster wheel you can't get off of. It's trying to find the upside down mirror in a mirror maze while playing musical chairs. I think that's pretty good. Having a computer with every window open and trying to read them all at once. A squirrel carrying something shiny to put on a pile of shiny objects until the pile topples over on top of them. Putting together 5 jigsaw puzzles at the same time and the pieces are all mixed together and the boxes have no pictures. When getting the right meds, someone said it was like getting glasses for the first time, which is something I obviously relate to. So this is kind of or I got it from somewhere else. This isn't like a official way, but I think it's a helpful way of thinking about ADHD, that it can be external and internal, and there's strengths and challenges with both. So I really like this little picture and thinking about how ADHD is external. And this is a good time to mention that ADHD research and understanding about ADHD is constantly changing. I'm sure some of you remember when ADHD was called ADD, and then we've added the H, and then now we have type 1 and type 2, or distracted or non-distracted or combined types. And these are just, people are learning more and more about it, combining, uncombining, trying to find different ways of thinking about these things and where the crossovers are, all to help us understand it better. So things change. Don't get too stuck in, criteria and clusters and all that. But externally, this looks like kids are always going, bouncing, fidgeting, tapping foot, rubbing the table, walking in circles, big temper, explosive feelings, talking a lot or making a lot of sounds with the mouth, messy, acts without thinking, impulsive, interrupts, right? Can't wait to speak, struggles to wait their turn. And generally when they're in the room, there's just a lot more in the room as well. Okay. They can struggle with resting. They can struggle with fun. They can struggle with quiet even, right? So they just have to make room, make noise, right? Internally, you'll find these people are more anxious. They might have racing thoughts, ruminating, and daydreaming. And so it's up in the head where the thoughts are going everywhere, and they can appear distracted. They often can fly under the radar. And internally manifesting ADHD kids can develop difficult coping strategies. And I would say anxiety might be one of those. They're a lot less likely to be diagnosed. So some other things on the list are, overlooking details, difficulty with sustained attention, forgetful, appearing not to listen, losing stuff. Super fun. So masking is something you might have heard of before, but just refers to covering up symptoms or behaviors so that a person appears what they're not. They're wearing a mask. And this shows up with lots of different neurodiversities, not just ADHD, people with autism, and other things, right? We all find ways of showing up the way we want to show up. And I was a Scooby-Doo fan when I was a kid. So one of the arguments against ADHD is that we don't want our kids to be labeled, or we don't want to be labeled. But labeling is kind of how we function in the world, right? So we have to give things names and understand things, what things are, and so we put labels on things. And so if we don't give them a label of ADHD, and I'm not advocating either way, I'm just saying that I would rather my kid understand, and me personally, that this is what's going on with my brain and it works this way, not I am irresponsible, flaky, lazy, unmotivated, obnoxious, self-centered, immature. I have emotional dysregulation issues, or, because of my ADHD and the way my brain functions, I don't remember like other people remember, or I struggle with, task initiation. And it's this kind of language that can then be empowering. Now, I agree that, ADHD can feel like a fallback. We talk a lot with our kids about the divisions between a reason and an excuse. And they are different, but it's really easy to let reasons become excuses. Still, having an understanding of how your brain works can really mitigate the damage that these labels can do. Because I promise you, if your kid has ADHD, they've gotten some negative labels already from people, from themselves, right? That's just part of what it is. So let's treat ADHD. Let's figure out what's going on. And so we can really have a clear picture and help our kids succeed. So here's some just really lesser known traits of ADHD. There's a brutal internal dialogue. And there's a guy named Ned Hallowell. I have a video later on that I might share. And he talks about, he's amazing. He's got a ton of research. As ADHD himself, he was early in the scene here, and he's got a neuroscience background as well as a medical background. And anyway, he talks about now I can't remember the name of it. It'll come up later. Something about the acronym is DMN, DMN, I think. So we'll pull it up later. But because of that, it plays into this brutal internal dialogue that I'm terrible, I'm the worst, I suck, I never get things right. Very all or nothing, which is classic ADHD. This idea of rejection sensitivity is also a lesser known ADHD trait. Some people even call it rejection sensitivity dysphoria, to the point that it's just completely unreal and they just think everybody rejects them. They can have inflexibility and struggle with change, delayed emotional regulation, or just behind what their peers are. Struggling with reflection, they can't view themselves, they can't ask those internal metacognition questions. Working memory, overwhelm, fibbing or lying, and time blindness. And we'll talk more about these, but I want to put them on your radar if you haven't. If you think ADHD is just hyperactivity, it's a lot more than that. Oops. Okay. So on that fibbing one, impulsivity shows up in a lot of different ways. So as adults, overspending, getting in trouble with law, anger issues, addiction, overeating, oversharing, interrupting, all of those come from impulsivity, right? Lying is a really common, especially with your younger ones. I guess all of them, but I think it's interesting how it shows up with little ones because of the impulsivity. So you've got stress responses. You've got fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which is try to soothe. Oh, it's okay, everybody's fine. And then there's fib. So a person with ADHD can feel betrayed by their impulsivity. They know better in their regular brain, you don't lie, that's wrong, that's bad, right? But in their impulsive, they'll make an impulsive mistake and they'll feel a lot of stress And there's this mismatch between what their regular brain would have done and what their impulsivity did. And so just be aware that like this shows up as well. This really quick to lie or to tell an untruth is also an impulsive thing, especially when we're under stress, right? And it's interesting how ADHD mistakes compound mistakes, right? So you'll be impulsive and completely random example, a kid, a child, maybe mine, maybe not, was impatient with her sister and dumped water on said sister, and said sister had a big emotional reaction, and the water dumper was like, I didn't do that. I wouldn't do that. So on the one hand, it was an impulsive mistake of being frustrated and dumping water, something that this particular kid really hates. And then there was no, I'm lying about it and digging in because, they knew should have done that. They knew that wasn't the right call. They knew they overreacted, but they aren't willing to admit it, right? So anyway, okay. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's all on a spectrum, and ADHD looks different for every person, right? So someone might have, actually do really well with emotional distress and not have emotional problems at all, or not, you don't see inflexibility show up at all. And then really struggle with other things. Or you can have ADHD and not be terribly hyperactive or forgetful, right? So I like this diagram. Again, this isn't like, a DSM or a psychologist is like rubber stamp, this is legitimate. There is a lot of people right now creating their own things about ADHD because we're just trying to develop an awareness of it and understand it in ways that make sense to us personally. So it's helpful because I like thinking about, it can look differently. So, I'm pretty sure all of my kids have some ADHD, but it looks different for each one of them. So let's move on now, talking about what ADHD students need in a learning environment. And so compassion and self-understanding are the first thing. And that's why I took so much time to talk about what ADHD is, to get us kind of on the same page, right? And, to really start understanding it. And then we need a strength-based approach and interest-based curriculum. We need boundaries, teaching them how to work within their ADHD. We need a toolbox of strategies, and then we'll talk about executive function support. So this is kind of our outline for the next, how much short time we have left. All right, compassion and self-understanding. Give us compassion so we can learn self-compassion. Every person I know with ADHD is insanely hard on themselves, so lack of motivation, caring, etc. is not the issue. I have a lot of quotes in this presentation from people with ADHD. You'll see those as we go through. So my first suggestion is to learn about ADHD together. The great thing about ADHDers is they make great content. They're very creative, right? And so there's a guy, oh shoot, what's his name? Connor DeWolf. Connor DeWolf, younger guy on Instagram, made so many great videos, and then in classic ADHD style, like hyper focused on something else and like started a movie, and then has kind of come back to it, but not totally. There's a woman on Instagram named ADHD Mum, and she's Scottish and hilarious. I adore her. You might have heard of How to ADHD on YouTube, and she's another young woman. She's got a baby now, but she started when she was a young adult, and that's a great channel. I've already mentioned Ned Hallowell. There's a number of really great people you can follow, but just kind of find one that you like. Then watch it together, learn about it together. And with the Connor DeWolf guy, I would show my kids the videos and they would all laugh, and then we'd have a good discussion about, oh, well, that's like that for me, but I don't actually experience it that way. Oh, I actually think it's a little bit more like this, right? So learn about it together. ADD.org is a well-established website with tons of resources. ADD Etude, so like attitude, but ADD Etude. I think it's still ADD Etude. It might be ADHD Etude. That's really another great resource. There's so many great ones out there. So find one that fits with you, that you like their style, and learn about it together. And then the other thing is, like, be careful. I mean, we talked about a label, right, of ADHD, but we still want to be aware of identity. So comment on situations, not identity. Instead of saying like, you are so messy, or you are so, gosh, you're late again, or why do you keep forgetting things, right? Just point out the struggle. Man, I can see you're really struggling to manage your stuff. I guess we've got to figure out some new tools, right? If you've ever read Atomic Habits or know that guy's approach, one of the things he really talks about is how personal change really like the most lasting and deep personal change comes from identity. That when we believe that we are this thing, then we do this thing, right? If I identify as a runner, I don't have to make myself run, right? I love to run. I'm a runner, right? I mean, you have to make yourself maybe sometimes, but that's the basic idea. And then as far as compassion goes, lean into the power of try again. I have a rule with a couple of my kids that when I ask them a question, and sometimes I'll just say, hey, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to not respond for 10 seconds, and then I want you to answer. And what that does is give them a minute to like answer more correctly, answer without that impulsivity. Or just, you have an emotional outburst and that came from this ADHD place, and you're like, let's try that again. If they're in the emotional place to be able to do that, or whatever it is, or your toddler that smacks you, right? Let's try that again. Lean into that. That's really effective. And just make sure that it doesn't feel punitive, and you're like, explain, you kind of have explained a few times, hey, you know what? You do things sometimes because of the way your brain works without thinking. And I just want to give you an opportunity to do it again and let you think about it this time, right? And just be like, the first one didn't count. You can't always do that, but that's kind of the basic idea. The thing is to pick your battles.
Before you get into pick your battles, I think jumping back to situation versus identity is a good place to address the question in the chat. I can read it, or you can read it.
I'll pull it up. Maybe. No, go ahead. You read it.
Question for wherever this fits. I've heard ADHD is a very overdiagnosed condition. How do you know who to trust, even amidst doctors? Or is it just better to recognize possible symptoms and just work with them? Do you need a diagnosis?
Okay, so it is actually fairly easy to get an ADHD diagnosis. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because it allows you to have tools, as long as, like, again, we don't go back to that using it as an excuse instead of a reason. Here's what I think. I think that there are a lot of these traits that show up even at different times of your lives. Like, there's been this whole thing recently about when women go through perimenopause is the first times they realize they have ADHD, because they've learned all these great coping strategies and all this, they're masking so well, and then stuff goes crazy in their brain, and they don't have that same capacity anymore. Or like grief can really show up and look like ADHD as well, or it can reveal ADHD, if that makes sense. And so I would just look at, as you're watching this, like, does it matter? Does it not? Right? You can have, like, every diagnosis, you have to have 5 of the 10 or 6 of the 8 or whatever it is to have the thing, right? But you can still have 4 of the 6, and that's kind of a lot still, and address those symptoms. Or characteristics or strategies, right? And so, some of this, the other thing about, so I've done these presentation before, and I've had people ask, well, doesn't this just sound like normal kid behavior? And it's like, yes, but when it becomes a diagnosis that needs support is about frequency and intensity, and maybe one other that I can't remember right now. But it's like everybody goes to the bathroom, but someone with a bathroom disorder has to go 99 times a day, right? That's a problem. So, if it's creating problems, if it's getting in the way of what you're trying to do, what their goals are, then I don't know, don't worry about being overdiagnosed. I've got family members that didn't realize they were ADHD till they were in their, adulthood. And embracing that, and seeing for what it is, has made them so much happier in life and so much more productive, right? And don't have an official diagnosis. So I don't know, does that answer the question, do you think, Eric? Should I move on? All right. Hope that's helpful. If you have follow-up, just go ahead and put it in the chat. So on the note of picking your battles, work within their reach, like, autism is another one of these that a lot of times it doesn't show up until the environment shifts to the point where it's not acceptable anymore, right? And so we can do a lot of things at home that just create this environment that makes, whatever their disorder is, not a problem. And then they grow up, or they start moving into other environments, and then things show up, right? And so pick the things that they need now, right? Like, if socializing is a problem, like there's some kind of social piece, and they're really concerned that they're troubling making friends, then maybe focus on the interrupting, impulsive, info dumping aspect that comes along with ADHD. But if it's not really something they're concerned with, or you don't think it's really impacting them, then maybe pick something else, right? And then also work within your reach, I would add. Sometimes we really have to teach skills because we're about to go crazy if we have to pick up their socks one more time or whatever it is, right? Like, it's not a great example, but you know what I mean? You just need them to manage a little bit more of their executive function because you're about to go crazy, right? And so you don't have to pick everything all at once. Sometimes it's emotional regulation is the biggest problem. And maybe all you can do with emotional regulation at that time is just have a rescue word. So a good example is one of my kiddos gets really oversensitive to loud environments. And I've got a few kids. So this came up when they were younger and we would be in a car and it would just get so overwhelming. And so all we could do at that point was just teach her that, like, we had a rescue word. And so we'd say midnight, or she would say midnight when it was just, I just need everything to stop right now. I'm going to blow, right? So that's the first step, right? Like recognizing and expressing help. And then later she's going to have to, and she does, learned to, what can I do to regulate by myself? Because I can't just call midnight when I'm at a friend's house, or, they're not going to know what that means. And then, learning other ways of regulating, other ways of coping. And so just kind of find, stuff within their reach. We want to set them up for success. And on that note, build them up. Positive reinforcement. Remember that rejection sensitivity stuff. You'll get so much farther with an ADHD kid by building them up, because they are tearing themselves down way more than you even know inside their heads. Is there another chat question, honey? Okay. All right. So compassion, self-understanding, like that's your foundation. Understand, what these things are, and just, what applies to your kid, and then offer lots of compassion. Then let's move on to the strength-based approach and the interest-based curriculum. Okay, so if we spend all our time managing our weaknesses, it sucks the joy out of life for us. We have to have a strength-based approach. And then this is a quote, I heard it somewhere else, and then I Googled it, and it was from an Angel Studios movie, I guess. I don't know, but I heard it from somewhere else. But I like it anyway. We can serve our weaknesses, or we can serve our purpose, not both. I just love that, right? Because you can spend all your time focusing and I do this bad and I do this wrong, or you can focus your energy on serving on what you are meant to do, what you love, what, your strengths are. So instead of impulsivity, we can think of this spontaneity of ADHD. Instead of hyperactivity, we can focus on the energy and the vibrance and the life and enthusiasm. Inattention and distraction can turn into looking at their curiosity and their creativity. And their oversensitivity is their discernment, right? So, or critical thinking. So you can kind of see like how these, my favorite phrase is the shadow side of your strengths is your weaknesses, and vice versa, right? The sunlit side of your weaknesses are your strengths, right? So what are your student strengths? And then find regular ways to utilize and leverage those. So if your kid struggles with impulsivity, guess what? They've got this great spontaneity energy, right? So build spontaneity into their schedule and their curriculum. That could mean like and maybe you have to plan your spontaneity, but you're like, you know what, today we're going to go to the park, or we're going to, just change it up on them. Now, some kids, inflexibility with ADHD, that's not going to go super well. But let them change things up. Let them just like throw some crazy thing in there, and leave lots of options to do things their own way so that they can be spontaneous in the moment. My son, for his schedule, he's got a checklist at the top of the page. There's like 6 things he's supposed to do in the morning first. And then at school is one of those 6 things. And then below that, we have kind of a, he's got to do language arts and math every day. And so it just says language arts, math, showers on there, because otherwise he forgets to shower. And like when he's going to do his exercise. And it's just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then it just says language arts. But then he's got like a menu that he can choose from. And it's a bunch of different things. And so that allows him to be spontaneous as far as like, and flexibility or choice, that's another way you can think about it. That he doesn't feel like, oh, I've got to do the same thing every day, right? So there's options. I should put options on there. Leaving options to do things their own way or to choose, right? Can really lean into that strength. And then, the other thing is like kids that make choices, that want to make choices, that have really strong agency. That's a good thing. That's going to protect them from making dumb choices when their peers do dumb things, right? That's going to help them be leaders. They're going to change the world. So this is a positive. All right. Hyperactivity, it's energy, right? So in your teaching at home, in their learning environments, freedom of movement during their work. That can be letting them walk while they do their math facts or whatever, or lay on the floor or fidget or bounce. Again, your community at home, you've got to like figure out what works for you, but give them like options of things that they can do that help expel some of the excess energy. They can like let them jump on the tramp while you do spelling words, whatever it is. Lots of movement breaks or movement challenges, right? So energy kids need to be challenged in their movement, not just take a break and go for a walk, but like, all right, let's do plank. How long can we do plank? Here we go, right? And you can gamify it and have a whole series of, energy chain, challenges they can do. Make sure they're in extracurriculars that are using up that energy. And then lots of handwork. And handwork's a term I started using recently with my son. I just have such a strong belief in the importance of handwork when it comes to education and curriculum. Like, yeah, we need to learn this academic thing, but we also need to learn how to do cross stitch or wool felting or some whittling, right? We need to use our hands. We have bodies for reasons. And so give opportunities for handwork, like as a subject, right? You could do it that way, or while they're doing other things to be able to do handwork. And so this could be doodling or drawing. This could be whittling. This could be, I love wool felting with the needle because it's just like repetitive, right? And it's got that like ASMR sound to it a little bit. And it's got that repetitive, right? It's a bouncing energy. It's a beautiful thing. And it's so simple. And it doesn't, I mean, they might get a little stabby, but it's not, you can teach really easy safety. Like a glue gun's more dangerous than wool felting. But like those kinds of things, right? And so you're doing a read aloud, they're listening to an audiobook, and they get to do something with their hands. And so you have channeled that energy, and now you're teaching two skills instead of one, or at least maybe even three, So, inattention and distraction becomes curiosity and creativity. So here's examples here. So if you do something like a curiosity hour, one of my aides, I called her the other day and had to talk to her and said, what are you doing? She's like, oh, we're just watching random YouTube. I can't remember. She had a cooler name for that. And I'm like, oh, I call that curiosity hour, watching YouTube videos together, right? And so we'll do this thing where we're like, all right, we're going to spend an hour together. We'll let everyone choose one thing and just do a short little Google search, or we take turns. And so someone's like, I'm really interested in this and I want to share this. And anyway, so it can be to ask a question. It's just kind of, just random where our interests are, right? But it allows us to follow our curiosity. My kids love it when we do curiosity hour. Rabbit hole learning. This can be like a spot in your schedule, like language arts or math, like you'd have, it's math time or whatever, right? Or it can be like their whole curriculum. And I've done both ways. And so pretty much always I have, okay, what is something that you really want to learn about? Go down the rabbit hole, meaning that's a reference to Alice in Wonderland, right? Follow that curiosity, see where it takes you, and let them learn to follow their curiosity and go deep with their stuff. Keep a Y log of all their questions and their connections. So, when they ask, so this is a way to like, as you're, working on something particular, specific, and they are, but why this? And there's kind of distracting, or it's going off here and you're really trying to like follow this through line. It's a way to like acknowledge their question and then come back to it later. So they don't feel like they were just, asking some dumb random question, but they feel validated, and you write it down, you write it down, and then you either follow up with it later or you have them follow up with it later. And then in addition to that, it's really interesting to see what one of the reasons, so creativity is essentially connecting things that other people don't see connections to, right? Like putting this thing with this thing, and now it's a new thing, right? And so keeping a connection log is another way to do it too. So you're reading about such and such, and they come up with some random question. Like, man, that's so interesting. One of my kiddos loves to do like a quote book. And so she's always pulling funny, quotes kind of out of context to make them laugh. Connection log is kind of a fun way to do that as well. And so these are ways that like really lean in to their inattention and their distraction, but showing them and highlighting, you are fundamentally a very creative person. Look at these connections you make. This is so interesting. Building their learning activities out of their interests is another way to really lean into their curiosity and their creativity. And then developing strategies for reining attention. So like, horse, put those reins on it, right? We kind of talked about this, handwork can be this thing, but like drawing can be a way of reining attention. My oldest has drawn her whole life in almost every class, including like church classes, whatever, right? To keep her attention. And she admitted recently that now she's at the level where she's really quite an artist. And so she can get too into her drawing and it can pull too much of her attention. And so she's kind of had to like pivot and be like, okay, well, I can't draw this and this because then I'm all in my head about this character and this or whatever. But doodling, coloring, sometimes even just like a really brainless mind, mobile game can do that. I do that all the time. When I'm trying to listen to one of my siblings that likes to talk a lot. I have a really dumb game that I play that is just enough attention so that I don't get my mind doesn't wander, if that makes sense. I think a lot of times we request that their attention looks like the way that we think it should look, and we think if they're quiet and they're, facing forward, then they're paying attention. And actually for my kids, that's when they're zoning out, right? Like I know when my kid is not listening because they're really quiet. and, and so, they're just not moving. They're just like they're zoning out. They're not listening. So figure out those strategies. Fidgets can do this. There's a lot of different things. But figure out what works. It's going to be some trial and error, and it will change as they grow as well. Oversensitivity, discernment. Okay, so these are the kids that are detail oriented, that can think critically and love discussions and opinion sharing, right? So provide critical thinking activities. I have a great book about it's math teaching, and it does math circles, right? And so it's more about thinking about like how would you solve this problem, and they have to talk about how they got there. And it's really interesting to do it with I do it with my kids, and I see how, different ones of them notice different things, discern different things, right? Detailed oriented projects and assignments can be really great for these oversensitive, discernment powered kids, right? And then just have discussions together and let them share their opinions. Let them write an essay if they want, if they're writers, if they're older, and really take time to listen to their insights and the things that they are discerning. Like unpopular opinion, this clothing item's terrible because it's itchy, right? Like that's an opinion, and let them share those things and listen to them. All right, interest-based curriculum. This is basically what we do at Link all the time. But it's like you take what the student's interested in, right? Their friends were reading Percy Jackson, they picked it up, they fell in love with it. Where does that go, right? And so you take something they already have interest on, and then you just let that develop. You encourage it to keep going as far as their interest will take it. But like Percy Jackson's kind of a cheat one, right? It's a pretty easy one because you go from Greek gods and mythology into ancient Greece, and from ancient Greece you can cover everything: sculpture, art, math, democracy, philosophy, geography, theater, Olympics, war, trade, Renaissance, and more, right? Like it just keeps going, and it can just spin and spin and spin. And when that interest is engaged, a different part of their brain really is working, and it's learning at a much deeper level, right? There was a woman, I tried to find it before we met, about her daughter was into My Little Pony when she was like in fourth, fifth grade. And they basically used it as the spine of their curriculum for 2 years until My Little Pony kind of died out. And she listed all the different ways that, like, I think it got to Greek gods as well, right? But like she just kept using as a jumping off point for all that you do. I ran out of time to finish the slide, I just remembered, but like my son right now has been wanting to do a unit on France, right? I'm like, why do you want to do France? Is it French Revolution? He was in Les Miserables when he was a younger kid, and I was wondering if it was coming from there. And he's like, nah, I just think Napoleon's really cool, and I want to learn everything there is about Napoleon. And I'm like, okay. So when we hit January, we're going to start an interest-based curriculum all about Napoleon. And so we'll start with, who was this guy? Where did he come from? Which part of France did he come from? The boy is really interested in maps. If I can, literally for reading Alice in Wonderland, he was like, ugh, it's like such a kid book. I'm like, okay, well, I want you to make a map of Alice in Wonderland. Like where does Wonderland, what's it look like? Where's everything at? The kid loves maps, right? And so he was like, okay. So now all of a sudden he's listening to the book completely differently than he would otherwise because I've engaged his interest, right? Anyhow, so we're going to do a Napoleon unit, and we can just go as far as I need to hit different subjects that he needs some experience in. Writing is definitely one of them. So that's the other thing too. Like if there's a subject that they struggle with, definitely make sure that their interest is there as well, right? You have them write about something they really do care about, or in a way that they care about, or for a person they care about, to get them, to assist them in these things. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip this, but this is his name right here, Ned Hallowell. You can go Google this guy. He basically talks about he has ADHD himself. That if you have ADHD, you have a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. Okay. And he treats ADHD as a gift, and I just quite love it. So we're going to skip it though. Okay. All right, so strength-based. What are their strengths? Look at their ADHD characteristics as strengths. And what we didn't talk about was like other skills. Are they, the geography kid, the art kid, right? And so if you're always leaning into things that they're already naturally interested in and already good at, you're cutting out like all of the battle, so much of the battle, right? And it feels so good to work in your strengths. It feels good in your soul. It gives you more self-confidence. It gives you more energy and motivation to do the things that you don't actually like that much. All right, so which is a great segue into boundaries, teaching them how to work with their ADHD. So now we're going to look at their areas that they do struggle, and let's really get close into the brain. What is the brain not doing that causes the struggle, so we can understand it the best we can? And then we'll look at strategies and tools to help, and then make sure we're teaching also that, some contexts, those tools don't work. Good example of this is like, a fidget that you can bring to one context, you can't bring to another. Or laying on the floor, if that helps your sensory system, can't always do that, right? And so making sure you're also teaching, different tools and strategies for different contexts. So this is, again, I was telling you about how there's a lot of content creators that are just kind of coming up with their own things and doing interesting things that isn't necessarily, psychologist DSM approved. But this is just an image I pulled up really quickly. And again, because I like how it shows, both of these kids have ADHD, but they look different, right? And so this one kind of breaks them down differently between hyperactivity internally and externally, impulsivity, executive functioning differences, sensory and stimulation, emotional regulation, differences in time perception, and attention differences. So you're going to what is the one that's the biggest, that's causing the most problems? So you can start there, right? It's a good place to start. And then we're going to go with time blindness, okay? Which maybe you've not heard before, but this is from ADD.org. Great articles of content there, you guys, such good stuff. So according to research, the ability to perceive and estimate time is linked to the activity levels of several areas of the brain, including the prefrontal cortex. A lower level activity in these brain regions may contribute to poor time perception. Additionally, a disruption in the connectivity between different areas of the default mode network, that was the word I was trying to think of earlier, default mode network, may also contribute to time blindness and ADHD. The default mode network comprises several regions in the brain that turn on when your mind is wandering, okay? So the mind starts to wander, the demon stops working the right way, it's not connected the right way, we have time blindness, right? So far we've learned that prefrontal cortex, lower activities. We've learned mind wandering causes the demon to function, which can cause time blindness. And then last one, researchers have also found that time distortion is linked to medical conditions involving a disruption of dopamine signaling, a chemical messenger in the brain. And from the first few slides, we talked about how dopamine regulation is the problem, right? So one of the theories about ADHD right now is that it's a lack of dopamine. There's not enough dopamine on board to get someone with ADHD to do the thing, right? Like it has to build up to a certain level and then you have the ability to do the thing. They can't get up to that level, right? And then the hyperfocus is when the dopamine shoots through the roof, right? So that kind of helps you think. So then here's I know it's a lot of text, but a change in the chemical balance in the brain, changes in dopamine levels in your ADHD brain can make it harder to estimate time and figure out how long tasks will take. So, it's out in the interwebs on social medias these days, they're talking about like a dopamine diet because we're all addicted to our phones and getting all this easy dopamine. And you pick up your phone first thing in the morning, and I'm guilty, look at Instagram and eat little dopamine hits. And then like the thing that you have to do that's harder than being on Instagram is now a lot harder because you've already had easy dopamine coming into your brain, right? So changes in dopamine levels in your brain can make it hard to estimate time. So if that's something that shows up a lot, maybe the issue is the dopamine diet. Like what else are they doing? Poor executive function, we'll talk about that in a minute. Hyper focus, this is when you get super absorbed and you lose track of time and spending way more time on something, so there's not enough time for other things. Working memory deficit. Working memory is one of the executive function things, but usually people with ADHD struggle with this as well, meaning that you can't remember the information that you need at the moment. You have fine, like deep memory, way back in the past memory. It's those things that show up you just need to be able to work, to be able to do the thing. It can make it harder to keep track of time. And then emotional dysregulation. So ADHD can struggle with controlling your emotions. When you're affected by strong emotions, it can take your focus off the clock, so you lose time. So are you stressed? Lose track of time. Frustration, lose track of time. So what strategies can help? So something we do with all of our neurodiverse kids is make things external whenever possible, including time. So time timers, I'll show you a picture of those in a minute, clocks everywhere, calendars, a time log, schedules. My one kiddo uses music because most songs are 3 to 4 minutes. And so she knows that if I've got 20 minutes, that's 5 songs-ish. And so that helps her pace. Ludlow schedule board, which I'll show you in a minute. Directing the focus. So reminders and alarms. Reminder goes off. Oh, focus is coming back. Screen time limits. So you can't let the focus go outside, right? Music, again. Deadlines. Deadlines mean if I've got to focus because I have a time that has to be done. Countdown timers. You can get these for your phone too, where you say 10 minutes and then it will, and it's kind of nice. It changes colors as it gets closer to timeout. Just creating awareness of time, because it's crazy how people don't have this. So setting a regular alarm for every 30 minutes in a day can help people, their brains figure out what 30 minutes feels like. Doing a time log or diary where you write down or track in a phone or app how long you spend doing different things. Even just a wristwatch, or maybe a smartwatch. It can be just a regular wristwatch. Music. Work with poor working memory and executive function, making lists, breaking tasks down, time blocking and batching. Again, we'll talk about more of these in a minute. And then I was just listening to a random video and he said ADHDers conflate emotions and time. I'm like, that has to go in there. Where I'm going to put it, I'm going to put it right here. Because remember, looking at the brain science, time blindness can be caused to emotional regulation. So if the time blindness is showing up right around emotional regulation problems, then you're going to work on regulation tools and you don't have to worry about all these other ones as much, right? And then dopamine hacks. So let's look at this real quick. So this is the Ludlow schedule board right here. That's that big board with lines on it. Full disclosure, that's an AI generated image that my husband did for me because I couldn't find a picture of it, and it's in storage right now. We just took a big poster board, plastic board, foam board type thing, put washi tape on it, breaking down time by half hours, and we measured out so that the sticky notes we were using were also the same size as 30 minutes. And so I will give them their list, their to-do list, and then they get to choose where they put it on their time, right? And because it's sticky note, if they change their mind after they did the first thing and they want to skip it and move it around, they can visually see how much time they have left in their day, how many things they have to get done, how much free time they have. Some of my kids love this. Others of them do not like it, right? Like the ones that are more spontaneous, right? They love this one because it's structure, but not, right? It gives them a lot of choice. And then you can see the time timer here. There's red and white one. That's so you can visually see time counting down. You can see how that works. You can also use a sand timer, but then little brother can knock those over. This pink thing over here on the side, this works for my one kiddo like a charm. She loves this. She gets to click the on and off. She can set the timer and see how much time she has. It has an alarm. And it's got these little cards you can drop in that you can write what they do. If you need to get that lasered in on it. This is a timer that's got, you turn it and whatever one it's on, 5, 10, 15. So you can really quickly set timers. And then just a watch. A watch is really great. We love watches. Such a low tech useful tool. So this is time blocking. Everyone's different, but this can be something that's really effective. Task switching can be really challenging for ADHD, to go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Transitions can be really challenging. And so this is a way of I'm going to do all of this one kind of thing in one block. So for example, if you want your kid to clean up their room for 10 minutes every day, that's a great life skill and a good thing to teach at some point. Maybe that's not the thing you teach right now. Maybe you take all those 10 minutes of the whole week and you put them together in one hour session for the week and they clean everything up. And put whatever example you need there, right? Like maybe math every day is it's just a lot. So it might be better just to do it. I don't know if math is the best example of that either, but the idea is that if you take so much time to transition and it's so much mental energy to transition, then time block. Do all of your this at one time and then do that and then move on to the next thing, right? And that can have several benefits in that they will build up energy of getting all the things done, which will give them more getting it done energy for the next thing. And so it can kind of snowball, if that makes sense. Time diary. So there's a few ways you can do this. There's this is actually a Google spreadsheet, I think, where you put it in and then it shows you, what your percentages are. There's a toggle track. app you can use, and that people use this for like, contract work, but you can set up how much time am I spending blank and then time. Because again, time is a struggle for ADHD. They don't perceive it the same way. And so my sister actually uses Toggle Track, and she is a writer, and she would do this thing where she would be like, I haven't worked on it at all. I'm the worst person. And she actually uses the Toggle Track to like be like, no, actually, I've already put in this many hours. I'm okay. I'm not crazy, right? Because she just can't tell how many hours she's put in on things. So it really actually helps her mentally and emotionally to track it that way. And then you can just do, pen and pencil version. But this can be, obviously more for older kids, or with younger kids, you're gonna have to help do them for that. So they can kind of see, oh, we spent this much time doing this thing. And that can help with like Wall of Awful stuff. If you've heard of Wall of Awful, if you haven't, Google Wall of Awful. And there's a YouTube video that'll pull up that really gets at like task initiation challenges, and why kids like will drag their feet for doing something. It's really great stuff. So that is Time Diary. And so now from here, we're just going to jump straight into the toolbox of strategies. Eric, are there any chats? It's a good time to stop for questions.
Yes, there's one question that's asked. You can decide where it fits best. I think it will be in the next one, executive function support. I can ask it now and you can decide, or we can ask it when we get there.
Let's wait till executive function.
Okay.
So keep going. Okay, dopamine. So we've talked about dopamine regulation is the main challenge, one of the big challenges for ADHD. And so learning what creates dopamine and and I didn't put this on here, but like what messes up your dopamine, right? And you guys can Google this and learn about this if you haven't already heard about dopamine diets. But there's so many simple things that really just create just a teeny bit more dopamine that can really help. So we've talked about music a lot. Music's a big one for my family. But even just like mint or gum, or just snackies. So the ADHD mom gal talks about, you have ADHD if you always have candy wrappers everywhere, because that just little bit, it's just because you need more dopamine to get something done, right? And so my daughter Skylar, we kind of tease her because she always has candy in her bag, and her little brother knows it and will like take it out of her bag. But she'll have that candy in her bag for a really long time, and it's just when she knows she's got to like make herself do something, she'll have a purple Skittle or whatever it is, right? And it's just enough to get her to jump over that thing. Physical touch can be enough. Hugs, that nervous system regulation support. If you've ever heard of Change Your State from Tim Robbins, is that his name? I can't remember now. Tony Robbins. There we go. We have power poses, right? So the Wonder Woman power pose. There's a lot of great research about this that just my sister, again, she'll do this like little wiggly thing when she's trying to psych herself up for something. Just gives her a little bit of dump of dopamine. Dancing, other movement, right? Novelty, we'll talk about more on the next slide, but just the power of the new. Introducing chaos. So this leans into the spontaneity and the excitement, right? Gamifying things, throwing in dice, or the spin the wheel app that I have, or making things into a quest. So this bottom picture, you can see these are medals, and they have them for almost every fandom. It's called the Conqueror, I think, but it's a way to like make yourself do physical activity. It gives you a reward at the end. So like there's one you can like walk to Mordor, right? And so you track it in the app and you say what your goal is, and then you walk a certain number of miles or whatever steps, and then you win your medal. And so they're not that expensive. Like I think it's around $20 or something to do a quest, maybe it's a little bit more. But one of my best friends from high school does these all the time. It gamifies the things she knows she needs to do and gives her a little reward at the end. And it's just really fun. Like I said, they have them for all kinds of fandoms. But that's just an example of questifying, gamifying the thing that you need to do. That's really kind of hard. Other rewards, and then exercise. A little bit of exercise gives you dopamine. So those are all really simple things you can do. Lighting a candle, which we'll talk about, I think, next, will give you dopamine. So I love this little chart here. The interest-based nervous system means a task can be completed if it includes any of these things, okay? You don't have to have all of them, right? If you have all of them, it increases your likelihood of getting it done. Novelty, interest, challenge, and urgency. So don't underestimate the power of novelty. If your kid is struggling to brush their teeth, get them a new toothbrush. And then when that's not novel anymore, get new toothpaste. And when that's not novel anymore, come up with a new song to listen to. Like you're constantly adding this novelty until it's something that they can do as more of a habit. And it's just kind of a thing they're able to do. If you know you need to drink more water, get a new water bottle, right? And then when that's not new anymore, put a sticker on it or get another new one. It doesn't matter. Like if you're doing the thing you need to do, it's working. A new pen, a new notebook, a new environment can be really helpful. Just going outside, same place in your house, like moving from one chair upstairs to another chair downstairs, or going outside, or going to the library, writing in a coffee shop. That's why people write in coffee shops, right? It's new smells, it's new stimulation. It just gives you a little more dopamine to be able to get the thing done. And I think I said lighting a candle already. And then a new system, or a new chart, or a new routine, or a new reward, right? Always throwing this novelty is like your get out of jail card. You can just throw it into the system whenever you need to. Throw it in there to just give yourself a little bit more of a push, a little bit more of a to get it done. Urgency works as well, right? Like, how many of us are guilty of like, someone's coming over, quick clean, right? Or whatever the deadline is. The thing about that though is it also dumps a fair amount of stress hormones into the body, and we want to be careful about that, right? So time pressure can be good, but it's one you have to use with, lots of restraint, I think. Okay, let's talk about more things. Impulsivity. Practice the pause. I kind of talked about this already, but just letting them rewind, do it again. We'd say rewind too, which was funny because they didn't even know what rewind was, because we didn't ever watch movies that rewound to kind of explain the metaphor to them. But really get in, if you've got impulsivity kiddos, practice the pause, teach them the pause. Okay, nope, we're going to pause. Let's do it again, right? And then finding ways to gamify the pause, right? Like, okay, we're going to play this game where stop, go, right? Run, 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 stop. And see if they can make themselves stop. This is like when they're little, right? Or, how long can you wait to eat this thing? So come up with games that practice waiting, building that brain strength to have a little bit more pause before they have the impulsivity. Board games are great for this. And we'll talk about that more when we get to executive function. And then just, grace and patience. Like, I don't want to say my impulsivity made me do it, but it kind of is, right? Like it's this part of their brain that did it without them thinking. And how sucky would that be to feel consistently betrayed by your own brain, right? Now, a reason or excuse, they can use that reason to help them build skills, not use it as an excuse to continue behavior that's problematic. Inflexibility. This one's interesting because I feel like this a lot of times comes from a lack of dopamine, right? And so transitions are so hard and they become inflexible because they had an idea of what was going to happen and it didn't happen that way. And then their brain just kind of falls apart because they don't know where that dopamine is going to come from for them to be able to do the thing they need to do, right? So giving plenty of notice for transitions is huge. Having clear expectations, like if you're super spontaneous, that's the word. You'll have to be careful with this one, right? And you'll need to be more clear and consistent with certain expectations so that they have some safety to rely on. Practice in small ways being uncomfortable or inflexible, right? Like, okay, I know you don't want to do this. I'm gonna make you do it for 1 minute, right? You can do anything for 1 minute. And let them practice and then, build it up. Address sensory and emotional needs, right? So if the kid isn't well slept or different things, that's going to really make inflexibility a lot harder. So kind of setting your foundation with making sure their sensory needs and their physical needs and their emotional needs are all handled well. And then increase dopamine. Give them a piece of gum, light a candle, like just something to let them get over that hump. All right, attention. There's more comments in the chat. Just make sure there's nothing coming up. All right. A narrate. I don't know if you've heard this tool before, but like just having them narrate what they're doing can really help their attention like key in. So this can be as simple as like, hey, go downstairs and grab something off the counter, and just have them say, I'm going downstairs to grab something off the counter. Even just saying it once can be great, but you can have them say it a lot, right? Have them repeat back to you what you just said or what the instruction was, right? So like, again, externalizing, keep that idea in mind. Anytime we can get it out, externalize it, whether it's visually, auditory, with our mouths, right? It's going to be easier and more handleable. We're setting them up for success. Look with your hands. This is a really cool one I learned about not too long ago. But have you ever had the experience where you tell your ADHD kid to go grab something out of the fridge and like, I can't find it, right? So and then you open the fridge and it's like right there, right? And that's kind of a kid thing, but it's definitely an ADHD thing. And until they learn the secret, because one of the issues with ADHD is that focus, right? That attention, there's tension everywhere and nowhere, because it's like the difference between a flashlight and a floodlight. The floodlight illuminates everything and they don't know what is important to look at. But if you have a flashlight, you know what to look at, or a spotlight, you're looking right at the one thing. So have them look with their hands, have them go into the fridge and like touch things. And now that touching helps their brain focus in, where without that body connection, they aren't able to know what to focus on. And so just the act of like having them use their hand. So you could like translate that to, tracking when you're reading, right? That can help you focus a little bit, because you're and they say not to do that, but actually if that helps you focus, then do it, right? If that makes sense. So the other thing with attention, going back to the other slide, is challenge. So if they're struggling to have attention, they're either it's not challenging enough, or it's too challenging, right? So we've got to find that Goldilocks zone of something's not too hard, but it's hard enough that it's interesting, right? Starting small or starting big. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Eat the Frog, where the idea is you do the hardest thing first. That's, I think, a Mark Twain reference. Or you can do it the other way, where you start small and you build little wins to build up to the thing that's super hard, right? And so everyone's a little bit different and can be different in different situations. So teaching them these skills, well, it didn't work, let's start small. Didn't work, let's start big. Let's do the hardest thing first and get it out of the way, right? See how they work. Breaking down the task, or giving them a roadmap of where we're going. This is a writing instruction that you do. Like, you got to tell them where we're going, and then tell them where we went. So they can kind of know, okay, I've got to pay attention for this amount of time, or we're going to talk about this, this, and this, and then we can be done, right? And so you're giving them some, again, boundaries for their attention. I need you to listen for 2 minutes, or I need you to listen until we get through this, this, and this, right? And then their brain has kind of a map, somewhere to go. Handwork or mind work. And I kind of brought this up already with, writing or drawing, or a fidget, or wool felting, and then mind work is, this is all ADHD. It's definitely been an experience for some brains that I know very well, where they just need a little more stimulation than what's currently in front of them to be able to listen to what's currently in front of them. Otherwise, they'll get totally distracted. And so that can be like the mobile games I mentioned, just something just a little bit, the brain to do a little bit so that they can then listen in. I had a couple of students that listened a lot better if they could talk to their friend while they listened. I'm not even kidding. It's only 2 out of the 100 students I've had, but I did have 2 students who listened better if I also allowed them to talk to each other while we were doing something, like while I was giving instructions. It was crazy, but they literally could listen better. They could repeat back exactly what I had said. And if I asked them to be quiet and not do that, they got distracted. So think about that as well. Mind work. Another way to kind of focus attention is having deadlines, right? Like, you've got to get it done by this time. And again, increase dopamine. So if attention is struggling, pick something off that list, right? Stand up and do 10 jumping jacks. It absolutely works. Emotional regulation. So teach them appropriate ways to get feelings out of the body. Feelings need to get out of the body, and they need to have ways that it's appropriate and helpful for them to do so. Teaching them grounding techniques. I'll show you on the next slide what that means. Meeting their sensory needs. I have a daughter that swings. She's broken several swings at this point. Teenage daughter. We were, gosh, I remember what it was. We were out doing something. She had a really long day, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I was still working on something, and she's like, I knew she needed a swing. Like, she came in, and I was like, you need a swing, don't you? And we didn't have a swing at our house at that point. Anyway, so I drove her to the park at 11 o'clock at night and let her get in the swing and swing for 20, 30 minutes and then get back in. And she was a new person. She just goes from being like, ready to explode and just fall apart and just melt, to just being like, hey, I'm great, So now we finally have a swing, and she can go out whenever she wants. And so, like, jumping on the tramp can be one. That's just what pressure blankets are, pressured vests, the socks, I will show in the next slide, right? Those sensory needs, and then meeting their physical needs as well, right? It's hangry is a thing. My sister sent me this video I tried to find to show you guys of this guy, and it's got this song, and he's like, my life is just over, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I feel this, and I'm having this existential crisis, and I can't motivate myself to do all these things, and it's like this song, right? And then it gets to the end, and he's like, oh, I'm hungry. It's 3 o'clock and I haven't eaten. Eats, I'm fine. Life is good. Life is well, right? And so that time blindness, losing track of like not eating, that's totally an ADHD thing, to just not eat and forget about eating and then having problems later. So really addressing those things as well. Fine, let's talk about hyperfocus, where people can just lock in and just be completely lose track of time. Make them aware that it's a thing that they do. It's usually about their special interests as well. Make time for it because it feels amazing. Like I would try really hard not to punish a kid for being hyper focused about something. Um, and then also just make sure you teach the awareness and you have the awareness that it is like running a marathon and that they need to have recovery time. So something that will happen with hyperfocus is that they, do this amazing thing and then everyone thinks they should be able to capable of doing that all the time and they really aren't. They can only do it so many times, and there's a physical cost to it. And so if they give you 150%, know that they're gonna have to give you 50% until they make up, their energy again. Okay, so over with this little fox purse, this is a grounding kit. So the idea here is to have the things that engage the five senses. So you've got a sucker over there for, taste. You've got some different textures to feel. I'm sure one of those has some essential oils on it so that they can smell something. There's the balm, so that's sensory, right, for lips or for whatever. It's a skin thing. And then some things to move, right? And so different colors to look at. So you're trying to engage, you can have and hear, yes, something to hear. So some of those things make sounds as well, right? So to get someone to ground, to come out of like an emotionally intense thing, that's something you can do to help them reset their nervous system, is to see, smell, go through the senses, right? So we built one of these little box for one of my kiddos who was struggling with some stuff, and it was really helpful for her. Like she could just go downstairs, take a minute, go through her things, and then come up and feel better. The sensory sock over here, give them some compression in their feeling. Bunch of fidget toys, sensory swings, another one, and then punching bag. Some of my favorite people couldn't get through their childhood without a punching bag, so they just need to, get the thing out, right? So find, and again, every kid is different. Different things will work for different people, but be aware that these are tools that do work. I already read that one. Oh, the other thing about hyperfocus is that they can experience this confusion or whiplash, right? They're being super hyper focused and productive and then completely unable to do anything, right? And so walking them through what that is and that's just kind of part of their life. I'm going to read this one because I think this is really great. If a kid is working on a stop motion video and you suddenly interrupt them to go do something, or even not so suddenly, a science experiment outside, they're going to struggle. Their dopamine is already on the stop motion video, and it takes them a bit to switch energy. And if they're worried they can't get back into that zone because it's so hard to get into the zone, right? When I'm really into something, I don't want to stop. If I stop, I might lose my energy and it's hard to get back, or I might forget what I planned, right? So, they might have some big feelings if you pull them out of that flow state that feels so dang good. This is a reference to that wall of awful. If you don't know that task initiation is something that ADHD kiddos struggle with, you probably know that. You've never heard it talked about it like that, right? Like they can't get themselves to do the thing. Well, there's a lot of reasons why. And so the wall of awful video, we'll talk about that as well. The only other thing I want to say about that is just dopamine is your friend, right? Go back to that slide that's got the 4 things that help you get anything done. Novelty, challenge, time, and interest, right? Urgency, that's what it was, urgency. And find ways to pull those strings to help your kids get the things done they need to get done and to learn the things they need to learn. Okay, executive function support, here we are. So you may or may not be familiar with this. You want to do the question now?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's read the question, then you can decide where it fits best if you want to answer it now or later. What I'm struggling with right now is all the things my kids need to help with their executive functioning skills require me to do a bunch of executive functioning stuff, which I suck at. Probably no answer for that, but if you have thoughts, I'd love them. Comment. It's kind of a cruel trick of nature that ADHD is hereditary.
It really is. It's just so mean. It's so mean. It's even worse when you're married to all the ADHD people and you're like, I have to function for everybody. Anyway, I don't know what that's like. Okay, so executive function, this is a term that's, you look it up and here's the 8 things, here's the 12 things, here's the 9 things of executive function. There's a lot of crossover with ADHD symptoms, and so I'll show you that. And this book picture here, this is to show you what a scaffold is if you didn't actually know, because we're going to talk about scaffolding. So Look how these overlap. Response inhibition, the capacity to think before you act, ADHD. Sustained attention, ADHD. Emotional control, ADHD. Time management, ADHD, right? Task initiation, ADHD. Planning and prioritization, that is focused on that. It has to do with focus, right? And knowing where to put the focus. Flexibility, right? So you can see there's a ton of overlap here, which is why some people call ADHD an executive function disorder. And I don't know if they're right or not. Organization, goal-directed persistence, working memory. My husband has massive working memory issues. And the funniest thing when we'd get married is like, he's going to run to the store and I'd be like, all right, for milk, right? We need milk. Okay, and bananas, milk and bananas. And I need a bar of chocolate, milk, bananas, chocolate. Oh, and we're out of toilet paper. And then all of a sudden can't remember any of them, right? Like he's had his limit. It's 3. You give him a 4, everything falls apart. Well, now after almost 20 years of marriage, he's up to 5. He's not nodding. I think he can do 5. 5 things without forgetting. But he knows now just to write it down. It just makes more sense just to write it down. Don't make his brain do that if he doesn't have to.
If it goes over 4, I write it down.
It just makes me laugh. But it's a thing, right? People struggle with this. So this goes back to the externalizing, right? Like get it out somewhere else so your brain doesn't have to deal with it. And then metacognition, we kind of talked about this already, like the inability to like think about, evaluate yourself. How am I doing? How did it go? So there's a book called Smart But Scattered, The Revolutionary Executive Skills Approach to Helping Kids Reach Their Potential. It's very focused on school. And so it's not like super great fit for homeschooling, but it does do a good job of talking about all of the things. And it has a couple of tests in there that you can like have your kid take and get a sense of like where they're at. And it helps you understand like what's age appropriate for each of the ages. Now that said, 50% of neurodiverse kids have a second thing, right? Including, asynchronous development where they're highly developed in one area and behind in another. So, what is age appropriate? But at least kind of gives you an idea of like what is within their reach. So that can be helpful. But, when you're trying to support executive function, the first thing you're going to do is figure out what's an appropriate goal or expectation. So that's where that like little quiz can help, or just like, looking things up. For their age, but also for their particular ability, right? Like a lot of times the smarter the kid, the more likely they are to struggle with things that you're like, really? You struggle with that, huh? Well, that's a fun one, right? I won't say if it's a niece or nephew, but one of my siblings' kids really struggled with wiping their bum. This kid was so smart, like genius level, but the bum wiping was a challenge, right? So it's just a normal thing. And so just, try to approach it with a sense of humor. Whatever you decide the goal is going to be is keep it within their reach. Something that they can, it's a stretch, but it's doable. So the first thing you're gonna do is scaffold externally. Look for external support that you can provide for the thing. So how can you make changes in the physical environment, right? Reducing distractions. Are there barriers that make it harder to do? Can you add reminders? Can you add organization to it? Can you reduce the complexity, right? I have a piece of exercise equipment that I love that folds up nicely and put out of the way. But guess what? If it's folded up and put out of the way, am I going to do it? No, because I just added a step. I've got to unfold it and put the thing back together before I can even use it. So for me to use it, it has to stay out. It has to stay out, put together, so that when I have the dopamine to go down and use it, it's just right there and I can do it, right? Eliminate steps. Can you change the nature of the task? Can you shorten it, build it in breaks, give something to look forward to, schedule, build a choice, make the task more fun, right? Can you change the way the adults interact with the child? Meaning, can the adult give more prompts? Can more praise, more feedback, more debriefing? So all of these are external scaffolding things you can tweak and do when you're setting it up. So let's think of a executive function thing we want our kids to be able to do. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Eric, do you got anything for me? In the meantime, I'll make funny faces. I don't know, make your bed.
I need to look at the list again. It wasn't.
I need to look at the list again. There were more than 4 things on it.
Oh, ha ha ha. Right? I don't want to use bum wiping. We'll do making your bed, right? So if there's lots of pillows and there's a top sheet and there's, maybe the mattress topper is a little bit slidey, right? or if it's a bunk bed and they're on the top bunk. All of those things are going to make things a lot harder for them to do it. And what you want to do is create success. So you want to simplify the system, the environment, whatever you can to build success. So then that kid starts to identify as someone who's good at making their bed, and then you can pull away some of the supports or add complexity, right? So if there's just one pillow and one blanket and all they have to do is like smooth it and put the pillow, great, let's do that. And they're feeling successful, and then they can have their 4 stuffies back on the bed or whatever it is, right? Does that make sense? That's kind of a lame example, but this is gonna be a whole nother like presentation. So I don't, oh, it's already 8:53. Yeah, so, but that's the basic idea. Like look for the external supports that you can add. I really like the idea of building in breaks and shortening. I think that's where you get a huge amount of a bang for your buck, and then externalizing as much as you can. So each of my kids, every 6 weeks to like 8 weeks or so, we create a new schedule, and we have like, you know, some things they're supposed to do every time, and some of them like to check things off, and they make it however pretty they want to do it. And then, you know, we look at, okay, we need to shorten this task because you're not doing it. So we're going to make it shorter, make it more doable, right? Or we're going to tweak, you know, we're always tweaking things, always tweaking, always building in choice, always trying to find ways to make it more novel and more fun. And then as they're practicing it, you give them plenty of time to practice it, gain confidence, and you know, then you slowly remove a support piece, or you add in back something that you were doing for them, right? And then making sure they're still successful before you know, completely walk away. So again, the Goldilocks principle, just enough support for the child to be successful, and then you're going to wean them off that support. Or you could do it the easy way, which is to play games. Now, this is not like, this is a real thing. The Harvard has a whole like guide, which I've got it linked here, and I'll show it to you, on how to use games, right? This is well studied, and it really does work. So I've only included a couple of examples here, but for younger kids, this Suspend game by Melissa and Doug's, think about all the things it does. Planning and decision making, attention. You have to like watch and follow where people are doing it. Following instructions, impulse control. Like you can't just like, right? Regulating disappointment, excitement, frustration, right? So this is a more physical balancing game, but there's a ton of executive function skills they're practicing doing this game. For older kids, Catan, man, I love Catan. Planning, working memory, remembering things, inhibitory control, taking turns, prioritizing competition, cognitive flexibility, counting, and critical thinking, right? So games are like your easy way to teach a lot of these skills, strengthen these skills. In just kind of a general way, right? Now, you are going to have to probably come up with certain plans for different kids to teach things that they're continually struggling with. But just as a practice, play games. Here's a list of a bunch of them. And then this Harvard guide, and I can put the link somewhere too. There's just so many games, and there's so many websites that talk about this stuff as well, that will just teach these executive function supports without you having to use your executive function to teach them the things, right? So gamify whenever you can. All right, we forget. Working memory is often limited. Having things like rules, boundaries, procedures, steps, reminders, lists, visually displayed or written down or some other way externalized helps me so much. So to the mom who is, let's go back, who is struggling, how are you externalizing everything? Like work on your own system that works for you. And then have that. You know, phones are great in so many ways because now I have everything on here, but guess what? When I pull my phone, that's all I see, right? And so I have to remember to go into this list or this Google Doc to find it. And so figure out ways to cue yourself to do those things. Like you've really got to get your system working and then have your kids' systems work within those systems. If that makes sense. Overwhelm. I didn't even know this was an ADHD symptom until I got medicated. It's like I have all these thoughts swirling in my brain and I can't catch a hold of enough of them to prioritize them. Something super important will pop up and I'll think, oh, I have to do that. But then something equally important will pop up and I can't hold on to them in my brain at once. It's so frustrating. I have super great ideas sometimes, but putting them into practice or remembering them all can be tough. So I just wanted to kind of point out some of these things. I think I'm going to be done though. I think we're going to stop there. I have some more quotes from students, just things they've said about having ADHD and what it's like if we need more of that. But yeah, that's kind of my presentation. I stop the share. And do we have any other questions we want to talk about? I was really hoping, I tried to give lots of, I kind of went over it pretty fast, but there are so many tools and strategies. The biggest thing really is that you just got to keep trying things and see what works, right? And see what doesn't work. And then you might try that again later and it works. My oldest kiddo for years has fought me on structure and a schedule. Mom, I just don't, that's just not how I work. I can't do a schedule. Well, she's now like on a more strict schedule Monday through Thursday. And we were talking to her about like foregoing that because we had something come up. I was like, well, I'll just drive you over instead of you riding the bus. And she's like, what did she say? No, I think I'll ride the bus. Structure really helps me. And I was like flabbergasted and wanted to scream in excitement and also, smack her at the same time because I was like, for 17 years, I've been trying to teach you this, but now she's got it and that's fine. And it's going to work and it's going to help her. So you just keep trying and you keep trying new things. And sometimes that's the novelty that puts more dopamine in the system to help more things get done. And the other thing is just don't feel bad about it. ADHD people are the best people. They're so interesting. They're so fun. My favorite people, like I said, my favorite people. And there's ways around it. I will tell you one funny story. While for seeing any Q&A questions want to come in, my sister, the one that's a writer, she also does tours. And so she had this was kind of recently when she kind of figured out she had ADHD, and she was a captain in the Army, right? So it's highly structured, highly scheduled, had been very successful. And she went away for a trip, for a tour, comes back 10 days later, and is trying to get back into her writing routines and all of this stuff. And she's really struggling. And she's like, what's wrong with me? Maybe I'm not actually a writer. And having, again, like a crisis, an existential crisis about herself and how she can't motivate herself to do something. And she was driving somewhere with my mom, and my mom was like, did you turn your timers back on when you got back? Because she's uses Google extensively, right? Google tells her when it's time for this, and she's got a timer for that, and the song plays when she's supposed to do this, right? And she was like, and she turns them off when she leaves, when she goes away. So they're just not going off, and she hadn't turned them back on. She's like, no. And so she turned her timers back on. That was it. It solved it, right? Like she went right back into her routines. She was able to get her stuff done, and she was just flabbergasted, and she felt kind of stupid, but also really empowered to know that, okay, I have to have these structures in place for me to do what is important to me, right? It's not a weakness. I mean, it is, but it's not a moral failing, right? Like but she's figured out how to make it work for herself. Anyway, what's the story I was going to tell? Any other questions pop in? Oh, another thing is sometimes we prioritize consistency as like it's the golden grail of awesomeness, right? And if we can all be consistent, then we're good humans. Well, you know what? That doesn't, like going back to that time batching chart that I showed you, some people don't work well when they're told to do something for 10 minutes every day and then another 15 minutes, my sister recently, like within the last few months, has started this writing process where instead of, doing that first draft of writing that's very creative and very spontaneous. I keep struggling with that word. Over the course of a month in 2-3 hour chunks, she's like condensed it into 3 days of craziness. And she's got all these dopamine hacks. She's got a whole system of things that like, okay, when I do this, I get to have this little thing. When I do this, and all these little things she's doing to keep her dopamine up. And she's writing 30,000 words in 3 days, which is insane and amazing. But she's done it 3 or 4 times now. And it's the best way for her to work. And it's taken her 5 years to get to this point where she's realized the best way to write for her brain. And so, us adults are still figuring this out too, but just keep trying, just keep pivoting and trying new things and stay positive, right? Like ADHD is awesome. ADHD is awesome. There's a whole song about it. I mean, granted, it's a cover of a song, but it's still a song. All right, we good then? Thanks for hopping on. If you want access to like the slides or anything, just let me know. That's kind of my best hot tips. So good luck to you all, and thanks for hopping on.